related recommendations have not yet been considered in detail, because as you can appreciate that when these reports come forward, they are extensive usually, and it's sort of trying to work out which is the most appropriate and Jersey is able to actually implement. But I think it's important that that we look at that review and consider how we respond in the future. What I would like to say in relation to the residential buildings law, that the stakeholders and organisations like the Jersey Landlords Association and others have really been supportive of this piece of legislation. So I think that element in itself means that it's the right thing moving forward. There's going to obviously be as well future investment in the fire service, which was provided by an investment case for 26 to 29. It's being planned over a 4-year period, and obviously that is basically, obviously from a financial point of view, it's being phased in, so that obviously it's not sort of a one-hit type of thing. It needs to be phased in, and quite often as well, you need to phase things as opposed to trying to do it all at once, because sometimes that's not actually achievable. To address risks in relation to the non-staff budget, this is specifically for personal protective equipment. In PPE. Sorry, I've moved forward, I think, from that. I didn't know if Paul wanted to actually add anything to what I've said about the Grenfell thing.
No, I think, yeah, so as the Minister said, that these are extensive reports, very, very big, and the size of the reports and the origins of some of the failures that were found during the inquiry are such that you have to go very, very far upstream, further upstream than Jersey can go. So there's about product safety, product provenance, where building materials are tested, how they get a British Standard kite mark, all of the arrangements around that, they can't be done in Jersey. What we need to do is be observant and fast followers, if I can put it that way, I think. And so what we're focusing on are the things that we can do now. And as also the Minister said, there are many recommendations, and so we can't pursue them all now. However, whilst there are 7 recommendations we think are being addressed in these tall residential building regulations, but they're small in number, but foundational in nature. They are very fundamental and very, very beneficial. So that's that side of things. And I think the other part to it is that inside the Fire and Rescue Service, where there's also an awful lot of recommendations, we're tracking over 200 recommendations at the moment across a range of inquiries and learning. We are proceeding with a whole range of other ones in relation to the Grenfell Tower inquiry as well.
So just to get this straight in my mind as well, you mentioned about the 4-year period. So the phase 1, how long are you allowing for this to be put into practice? Phase 1, is that? So
so the phasing is in relation to the future investment question, yeah. And the original investment case was phased over 4 years. What ministers have done, and they've been supportive, they've essentially allowed us to move forward with the first 2 years of investment, and then we can review that as we go into that period. Of course, every time or both times that we've put investment cases forward, and the ministers have endorsed this one and supported this one throughout, and of course you'll remember the previous occasions, we have deliberately phased them. We understand that investing in any new investment is a challenging thing to do financially, and therefore we want to make sure that we do it proportionately, appropriately, and that we limit the strain, I suppose, on the financial on the financial system.
Okay, and I just wanted to say as well, thank you for the panel being able to look around one of the high buildings and see things put in place already, which is really good. Also about investment, we note that further funding will be required from the budget in 2027 to address additional inspection and enforcement requirements. So do you know what that might cost, the enforcement and inspection?
There's not off the top of my enforcement and inspection in Fire and Rescue Service. We have an enforcement programme now where we do compliance checks, audits, enforcement visits. There will be enforcement in relation to the tall residential buildings regulations, but no additional resources are being sought to support that. There are about 120 something tall buildings. We will.
Okay, so that might be necessary or to be able to pay for it?
No, yeah. So our plans and intent at the moment are that we that we will enforce those regulations in due course, and we will do that within the existing framework, risk-based framework. Essentially, there won't be very regular enforcement visits at all.
Can I just add a
yeah.
supplementary? Again, I'd like to also pass on my thanks to the team for our visit to Desmarais, and it was an excellent visit with very knowledgeable individuals. But we also had Andium officers there present, the Housing Authority, which again, they were able to retrofit that building. But are you concerned about any of the privately owned high-rise blocks and how they're going to comply with these regulations?
As you say, I think Andium has done a very good job, and I know, and I echo the Minister's thoughts there. I think in relation to building owners, managers, managing agents, they've all been very supportive and they've engaged with us very well. I think Andium are a very, very good example of that, and indeed their retrofit of sprinkler systems in their tall buildings was proactive. That was before we even started talking about these regulations. So yeah, very good. What I would say is we recognise that that managing buildings is something that that comes with cost sometimes when there are new things that come along. However, in relation to these tall residential building regulations, we are not bringing forward the power to require someone to implement anything they don't already have. No. So once they've got these basic systems in place, wayfinding and signage and things like that are all very, very, very inexpensive things to do. But for example, if a building doesn't have
Dry riser.
particular facilities, we're not looking at making someone install that. They should be in there at the design stage, and that's, as the Minister said, us being a stakeholder in the government's work on updating, it's called Technical Guidance Document 2, and it is the guidance document that underpins and supports people in complying with building regulations as much as they can. It's not the same. Complying with one doesn't mean you've complied with the other. And that's where we make our big gains, I think, in the future.
Literature.
Okay. So at the panel's last budget review, we received a submission about concerns for firefighters' exposure to carcinogen risk and PFAS chemicals in firefighting foams. So has any consideration been given to extending health screening for firefighters?
Well, you might as well take it, to be
Sure.
honest. Yeah, you might,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. Absolutely. So the government has extended an invitation to firefighters that were serving during the relevant period for PFAS screening. I'm in that period, and that's welcome. We welcome that, and I know the Minister does as well. That sort of side of things is a good and positive step in relation to PFAS. PFAS is a separate topic to the carcinogen or carcinogenic nature of the occupation and the exposure circumstances that have been highlighted by the World Health Organization, but they're both in the same sort of camp, if you like. They're both in the same sphere. The current firefighter health screening program includes vision, hearing, respiratory, skin surveillance, hand and arm assessments from using heavy machinery and plant and things like that. Vibration.
Yeah, white finger.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And that happens now, and obviously there is a routine and annual fitness and strength training program, testing program that goes on, and all of that kind of thing. But you're right. World Health Organization has added firefighting to its top classification of exposure to carcinogenic substances. The two main cancers that are found are mesothelioma, so asbestos-related, and bladder cancer. Yeah. And so what comes with that is a lot of correlation, but not a lot of causation. So we just need to do an awful lot of work as best practice to do that. And it involves having the right number of sets of PPE, making sure that you've got the right decontamination processes, making sure you've got the right policies and procedures at the fireground, making sure that you're doing face-fit testing properly, recording all of that. And that's what we're doing now. In fact, the University of Central Lancashire very recently produced a report on exactly this topic, more than 80 recommendations. We've got those, we're tracking those. That's in addition to the 200-odd recommendations we were already working on. And we are progressing relatively rapidly through those, although there is work to do.
Okay.
Does that extend to the airport fire service?
Yes, any occupation where you're exposed to carcinogens, and so this is all about the unburnt and burnt products of combustion. There are nasty things in years and years ago when you didn't have all the modern materials and products that we have in modern life now. Less of an issue, not a non-issue, but less of an issue. Now, of course, with the plastics and all the other things that we have all of the isocyanates, very, very complex cocktail, basically.
I think the big thing, I think, that from my perspective, was the PPE and the amount of PPE that's required for each officer, and of course the fact that that PPE is all actually fitted to that individual. Because sometimes people don't, I think, well, I probably wouldn't have thought about it so much, but when you actually look at it, that is the one thing that once you've been to this incident, when you come back, you have to remove all of that clothing and get it decontaminated. And I think that's the big thing. One of the big things for me was about the PPE and being able to actually have that so that people aren't going to be at risk from the continuation.
Absolutely, sorry, Mr. I think the thing is, in normal health and safety management, you start with eliminating the risk. So don't do the task, don't undertake the activity unless you have to. Then you reduce the risk. Firefighting is one of those occupations where you immediately go to the bottom or toward the bottom end of the hierarchy of risk control. So you're immediately relying on your PPE and your procedures and things like that. You're not up there in the elimination. You have to go and do that task.
And there's no concerns about the PPE. It's all as it should be.
Well, historically, we've had challenges historically, but those historic challenges, I think, we're turning that corner. We have secured investment from the government. We are moving on with that. It's about making sure that we have the right amount of PPE, of course, because if you're going to take the PPE away and decontaminate it properly, which we will do, you need someone to have a second set of PPE, otherwise they can't do their job anymore. Yes. And that PPE needs to fit them properly. It can't have pinch points, you get burned, it can't, all of those other things. So it has to be the right thing.
Okay. And Minister, can you confirm what the status is for any development of the Fire and Rescue Service headquarters in its current location?
Right, the replacement of the fire headquarters facility is now being considered within the Investing in Jersey programme in this specific phase for refurbishing and developing public buildings, which takes place between 26 and 2040. One thing it's important to notice is that Her Majesty's Fire Service Inspectorate highlighted the need for a new and what we would now call fit-for-purpose facility in 1984, which was almost 42 years ago. It's not obviously the fault of any particular government, but it's a good example of how long development timescales can mean that shifting priorities leave projects left behind, basically. And so I'm pleased to say that the approach of Investing in Jersey and looking forward in addressing this issue hopefully will assist. Obviously, one consequence of replanning and reprioritising on such an extent means that facilities become more and more needing of maintenance. And of course, where the fire service is, I don't need to tell any of you, the building is a very old building, and it's now being handed over to Jersey Property Holdings to actually maintain. And obviously, they've got high demand and limited resources as well. And so obviously from there, it's not their fault that the fire service is in what they are in. It is inherent in what's been going over on a number of years. And significantly, there's obviously roof leaks. So every time we have a storm, there's roof leaks. And obviously that means that we need to ensure that the budgets are in place for the maintenance of those premises to ensure safety of the fire service, because we only have one. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, that's it. No, I'd echo the Minister's point there about it's nothing that Jersey Property Holdings have done or could do about this. They have been very good to us since taking on the landlord responsibilities. They've been proactive. They've heard us and have been responsive. But it is cramped. It is old. It does leak. It is extremely inefficient. And of course, there's just the natural sort of change in standards. So, for example, we now talk about decontamination, and that means you have to have clean zones and dirty zones and things like that. Our building doesn't lend itself to that, so it's inherently unable to keep pace. And as I say, I echo exactly what the Minister just said there. I think the Investing in Jersey programme presents an opportunity because, as described, if it's done in too short-term thinking, then things can get lost. So I think this Investing in Jersey programme gives an opportunity to either be decisive across political cycles, or if we can't be decisive, and sometimes there are reasons why we can't do that as quickly as we want to, we build in a recognition that the longer you keep an asset, the more money you need to put into the maintenance of that asset.
Mind if I ask a supplementary about the headquarters? When we went on more than one visit now, one of the things that concerned me was some of the modern tenders, some of the modern units can't get out the door at the front and they have to reverse all the way around the building. Is that still the case?
Yes, that'll be the case for as long as
For as
we're
long
there.
as
It's not
the-
a drive-through building. It gets lower in the middle than it does at the front and the back.
Yeah.
And with things like the aerial ladder platform,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is a very large vehicle. That so and we have to modernise. We have to modify all of the fire engines that we buy anyway, in order for them to fit inside the appliance bay doors. It's a grade 3 listed building,
Yes,
I think.
yes.
And so the lintels, the Bressimers that sit, you can't change the height of
can't,
those. So you have to make the fire engine a bit smaller.
I think that's what happens with all old buildings in
Yes,
relation
that's
to
right,
when you need to put
Yeah.
equipment in them.
Kit gets bigger. It's like car parks. Vehicles get bigger. Car parks don't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Lovely,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. I had some questions about the legislation that's been lodged that's going to be debated next month about the violence against women and girls legislation. So since the publication of the task force report, can you briefly describe the work and the process that's been undertaken to develop each of the 5 pieces of legislation which you've just been lodged?
Yes, of course. We've got the technically facilitated abuse was one of the recommendations, emergency barring orders, ensure protections against misuse of emergency barring orders is incorporated in its design, introduce an offence of non-fatal strangulation and introduce an offence of stalking. So in relation to the draft sexual offences Jersey Amendment Law, this law improves the ability of the criminal justice system to respond to different forms of intimate image abuse and strengthens the existing Article 15 offence of sexual grooming of a child. In particular, this law widens the existing Article 15 sexual offences grooming of an offence of a child, creates 7 new intimate image abuse offences relating to the possession and creation of images, sharing of images, threatening to share images and cyber flashing. These new offences capture forms of intimate image abuse that make use of deepfake images as well as inauthentic images, strengthens the existing Article 36 of voyeurism offence by removing the need to prove specific motivations and strengthening provisions relating to indecent photographs of children under Article 2A of the Protection of Children's Law 1994 by bringing our legislation into alignment with the UK. You ask about the development of them, and I'll just, as we go through the particular legislation, I don't know if Nathan wants to add anything to that, really, because obviously he's been in the forefront of the legislation and the drafting and everything else.
I think we're particularly interested in kind of any of the challenges that you've had, and also in particular whether you've done any further consultation, because obviously the Vaughan Task Force report was a big consultation. Wondered if there was any more consultation that had been done.
Well, the Vaughan Task Force report gave us some fairly specific things to do in terms of recommendations to meet about new legislation. And as far as I can tell, that emerged from more or less a gap analysis between what do most jurisdictions have in terms of protection and what does Jersey have. And there were gaps. And I think that just reflects how the cycles of work in areas go through. Obviously, we've done a lot of work on children's rights and crimes against children. So, some of the other criminal justice stuff hadn't been looked at for a while. So taking that as a starting point, and taking legislation from the UK and also Australia, New Zealand and European jurisdictions as a base of how you might do these things, we effectively worked out a set of instructions to bring us into international compliance levels with other jurisdictions. And the drafts of those were available earlier this year, and there's been extensive internal consultation, mostly focused on questions about, can this work? Like, does what we've done here work in Jersey? Because if you simply take verbatim what other people do, you find very quickly it crashes into your system and things just don't work like that and can't be processed. So you're looking for the outcome to be the same, even though under the hood, the structure might vary quite considerably in some places, especially around court operations, especially around charging, as you'll know. We operate so differently. The timeline of a 2-year cycle with 1 year of drafting and 6 months availability of the draft laws hasn't allowed us to go for the full public consultation that we would normally do. And the justification for that is that actually just the analysis of the principles and the analysis of the harm and the need was done by the full task force.
Okay.
So we're effectively meeting the objectives to which the government has already agreed.
Yeah, okay, thank you. In the financial and staffing implications section of each of the pieces that you've lodged, you reference the significant pressure that's already placed on the criminal justice system. So can you tell us how your departments are preparing to incorporate the additional costs that are going to be brought about by the implementation of this legislation?
Right. Obviously, within all of this, we are putting together an investment plan in relation to the resources that are going to be required, because obviously it's not only police, it's going to be the LOD and all of the support services, and that work is still going on. So we're not quite at that stage yet, because it has to be identified that if you're going to bring in new legislation, particularly in relation to this type of legislation, and the fact that people are going to be more confident to report offences, you're going to have to provide the resources to do it. Because if you don't, then what's going to happen is that you're going to be stepping back and you're going to end up legislation that's not actually being used, and your court cases won't be getting to court, because it's going to mean that there's going to be more complaints, and we need to ensure that those individuals are taken through the process effectively, that all of that is then into the LOD, obviously getting them involved early doors, but also ensuring that the protective services and the looking after the victims through the whole process will be required. We've obviously done the criminal justice review in relation to the courts and the processes, and that's due out
11th of February.
Yeah, 11th of February. So I think the thing is that that will also indicate to us, I think, maybe where there's going to be obviously some recommendations in relation to that. So I think that, as well as of all of the new legislation, is we're going to have to look at this as a generic whole and see where we are going to have to put extra resources
So
in.
that will be going into the budget for 2027.
Yes, it'll have to. So I think...
Have you got any idea of a ballpark figure of what this might cost?
Do you want me to take, so
Yeah.
we've put some costs in the proposition, obviously, as you've seen, which is based on the police's analysis of how many more crimes there would be, and then costs for the prison. What we're hoping to do before you debate it is to put more meat on the bones around what the actual costs for the police will be as a result of that. Obviously, Robin can talk about this later, I'm sure, in terms of police officers, staff and facilities. Obviously, digital forensics will come up, definitely. We're also, as the Minister said, seeking to draw in one of the other VORG recommendations was a review of the Jersey Domestic Abuse Service and what resourcing it needs. We're seeking to particularise the costs that they need. We've got the sort of narrative, but we need the pounds and pence. And also there's a link between them and therapeutic counselling services that we're just trying to get health to draw out and particularise. So we're hoping, obviously we got to a point where we had to lodge the legislation, but we continue to work on the costings. So hoping to have a slightly richer picture for you when you debate it. And of course the key thing is it's landing into a system that is already seeing increased demand. And the right thing to do is to do this legislation, but it does have a consequence. We've also, the Criminal Justice Working Group meets tomorrow, coincidentally, we'll be seeking to draw out from LOD, courts and probation, well, what does it look like for you, so we can get to a total ballpark figure. The intention then is that because the suite of legislation, assuming it all does, has gone through the states, that in the budget process for next year is then regarded as a state's decision. So really that's the first thing that ministers consider when they build a budget. State's decision, must do that, and then move on to what the other priorities are. So the richer we can make that picture now, the better able ministers will be able to consider it for the next stage of their process. And we'll still have to have business justification cases outlining exactly what we'll do with that money and how we can show the benefit of it. But it gives us a head start in the budget process,
Okay,
and strategic finance are very
that's
supportive
really
of that
helpful,
approach.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, can I just say as well, we'll also need to look at the prison,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
without a doubt, because
Yeah.
that is, with the level of sentences, so the prison will need to be looked at as well.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the draft crime strangulation Jersey law, that was originally, it was suggested that it could go into the domestic abuse law. Can you just tell us something about the rationale of bringing it as a standalone offence?
I think the existing law incidents can be charged now as common assault or grave and criminal assault, and the purpose for introducing a specific offence of strangulation is basically to provide a statutory basis for strangulation as distinct from the customary offences of assault, allowing us to create a higher penalty, which is more appropriate and reflects more the severity of it. Because
But is that why you had to do it as a standalone and not put it in the domestic abuse law then?
I think it was
I understand taking it away from common into statutory, but
I suspect. So I think the concept of it being in the domestic abuse law comes from the fact the UK used a domestic abuse law piece of legislation to bring it in. I actually think they used the Domestic Abuse Act to put it in somewhere else. So it appears in there, but I think what it actually does is so in the UK, it appears in the Domestic Abuse Act, but what it does is it amends it into the Serious Crime Act 2015.
okay.
So in the UK, it doesn't sit in domestic abuse. Now in Jersey, without an Offences Against a Person Act, without legislative grounding for the various assaults, it was just simpler in operational terms to bring it in.
Okay. Are there any operational preparations that need to be made before that particular piece of legislation comes in?
from,
Well, in policing, probably. We don't believe so because that's open to discussion. I think, and I don't have the exact details because it's being managed on the health side, but there does need to be, as I understand it, a clearly defined medical pathway for assessing the evidential arrangements for if someone's been strangled.
So will that be brought in by order then, once those preparations have been made?
I'm not sure it's legislative.
Okay.
I think it might be something that they need to arrange so they can start receiving. But that's the rationale in the case of these laws for bringing them in by ministerial order.
Okay.
So as the operational arrangements are made with the law.
Made before. Okay, so thank you. If we look at the draft harassment and stalking law, that's going to introduce new offences of harassment, aggravated harassment, stalking and aggravated stalking. What impact is that expected to have? How important is the introduction of those offences really to Jersey?
I think the thing is I think at the moment we've got probably a gap, I would suggest, in relation to this particular type of offences. From my perspective, there's a gap at the moment. So there's different offences, and of course, quite often people get confused about what's harassment and what's stalking, and the differences between each. So I think it's quite important that we've got specific legislation for it, because I think in the past it's not something that's been particularly well prosecuted, and I don't know if Robin's got more to sort of say on that, but it's not really something we've been very successful at.
As has already been alluded to, we've probably looked to shoehorn other legislation which is out of date for, if you like, modern society. But the question you posed a few moments ago is the impact of that is, what is the difference between harassment and stalking? Well, the most important people to know that are the cops, right? Because they're the ones so there is an element of training. You will know that under the leadership of Alison Fossey, we've had Operation Soteria that have come across from the UK. So there's been already an enormous amount of training. That has to continue. And of course, that has its own cost as well. That and a number of the other bits of legislation that's proposed, as you again have already alluded to, that means not just more demand in terms of more crime being reported to us. It's important to note that in the broader scheme of things, not just around harassment and stalking, but rape and serious sex offences. I've said to this panel before the increases that we've had, VORG-related crime up 27% over the last 3 years. It will interest the panel to know, if I've not already mentioned it before, but for rape and serious sexual offences, 40% of that increase is historic. So that means over a year old. First of all, that makes it harder for us to investigate because it's not as relevant. Our witnesses aren't as, memory fades, etc., etc. The physical evidence is unlikely to be available. So all of that needs to be put into the mix. And the final element, which is not jumping across to wherever else the panel wishes to explore, of course, it's not just people, it's technical equipment, because most of the evidence we find on stalking and harassment will probably be on someone's phone.
So given all that, and what needs to be put in place operationally, what's the anticipated timeline then for actually bringing these laws into force?
Well, the work is underway at the request of the Minister, again led by Alison Fossey, to look at the impact, and our analysts have looked at what the potential is in terms of increased crime, etc. My expectation is that we will probably have something before the Minister in the next month or so, which will be indicative figures. But of course, if we put before the Minister and ultimately as the Assembly that, say, for argument's sake, the police need X number of police officers, of course, I won't be able to start doing that until the beginning of next year. So there's going to be quite a lag.
Subject to budget approval.
Subject to budget approval. Even if on the 1st of January, for argument's sake, to straight, said, right, Chief Officer, you've now got X amount of pounds to recruit the resource. As the panel knows, that will take a number of months. And those skills, if I look for transferees, which I'd rather, as you know, much rather use the staff that we've currently got and help to develop them, those skills are hard to find even in England and Wales because of the demands that we're currently seeing. So, if we got all of those things, and I appreciate there's a number of ifs in the answer I'm giving, we will be well into next year before we're able to actually probably see the difference in terms of staffing, assuming that we get money.
Okay, but I think what I'm trying to get at is, will you, Minister, be waiting until the police are absolutely ready to go before you make the order to introduce this law, or will you introduce the law and?
Quite frankly, I would introduce the law because if in relation to some of these offences, you have already got strangulation of people. This is just a separate offence. So
This is the stalking one.
Yeah, sorry, the stalking one. Sorry, from my perspective, you would introduce the law because if you don't, you could end up in a situation where you've created law. For me, this is my view. It might not be necessarily others' views. If you introduce law, you shouldn't be sitting on the law and waiting to be, because that might never come. And so for me, you have to take almost a leap of faith and say, we're going to introduce this law and we're going to start dealing with these offences. Obviously, the training aspect of it is something maybe different, but I would be uncomfortable to sit on a piece of legislation and say, I'm going to wait until we've got everything in place, if that makes sense.
Sorry to interrupt. I would strongly support that. This is one of the few times in my experience where I'm actually being invited by a government to say, what do you think the impact of this legislation is? I think in 3 or 4 jurisdictions I've never had that invitation before, which I welcome, but I strongly support the Minister. Bring the legislation.
So the public can expect, given that the Assembly passed these laws in a couple of weeks, the public can expect that actually they will be enforced pretty quickly.
Well, there's another factor as well. When you bring in the stalking and harassment law, you bring in stalking protection orders. Mm-hmm. And they're operated in the first instance by the Magistrates' Court and on appeal by the Royal Court. Courts in Jersey have never been asked to make pre-conviction orders like this before. And frankly, they've all been extremely helpful and reasonable about the fact that they're going to introduce new operational needs to them. I don't currently have a timeline for their development of the necessary criminal procedure rules and rules of court, practice directions, I think it's the Magistrates' Court, to get them ready to go. And our courts are particularly constrained. For instance, in the Magistrates' Court, in the UK, you can shut down 1 in 5 for training, but of course here, because you have one of everything, you have scheduling issues and other issues, and our courts are extremely busy at the moment. I haven't prepared with a conversation with them to give any timeline on their operation of that. But we have to remember that that's also a factor.
So we need the criminal procedure rules as well. Okay, but from a Home Affairs perspective, it's all systems go. Thank you. Will the same then apply to the emergency barring orders which are going to be introduced as a result of the changes to the domestic abuse law?
They're in the same situation in respect of the courts needing to prepare for
it is in the same. So okay. So we'll be waiting for the call for that. The accompanying report said that you're expecting about 20 emergency barring orders to be issued each year, and it says each one will be time-consuming and complex. So I don't know whether it's a question for you, Minister, or the police, but actually how will the police incorporate that sort of work within existing resources?
Whenever I hear a sentence that says time-consuming and complex, throughout my service, everything seems to have got more and more complicated, even though we've got more and more information
Yeah.
and more technology. I honestly don't think I know the answer to that question, other than that's part of the assessment that we're going to have to look at is, of those 20 or wherever many it is, who's doing the work for that? And I suspect it will be the police supported by law officers, I suspect.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
that's why it's essential that with all of this, that we do start asking for funding for everybody.
Understand that. In regards to all the proposed new legislation, have you got kind of an education/communication plan for the public so that the public are aware of the new legislation and how it might apply to them?
There will,
Yeah. So the head of communications for Justice and Home Affairs has been working closely with the policy team and also with the Building a Safer Community coordinator on this, because it will be really important that we land it. They haven't got a drawn up plan yet, but they're doing it in parallel with the legislation going through the states.
Is there going to be work specifically aimed at young people for this?
I think they've considered that, but I'd need to check to be sure. And obviously, it's a good steer
So
to
I think they're
include
just
it.
that particularly vulnerable group, aren't
Yeah,
they? And particularly about the sending of unsolicited
Yeah,
images and
Yeah.
possession
Yes.
of,
yeah.
don't want to use the word, but yeah.
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 So-
Could I just come in very briefly on training?
Yes.
So the Criminal Justice Working Group, as you know, has a training subgroup that is now being chaired by the Building a Safer Building a Safer Community Coordinator. It meets next week, and the first task for the sort of reframed group is to build a trainee needs analysis and a proper survey, essentially, or proper clear picture of what training is going on in this space across all the different
Across the system.
organisations already. And I know it's been done before some years ago, but it needs refreshing. And that will provide some of the foundational basis for some of the stuff that Nathan's been talking about. Because what we want ideally is training products delivered across the system so it's consistent.
To the
and that-
third sector as well.
Exactly. And that there's not duplication, and that can then be very carefully coordinated so that the most urgent and high impact things can be trained first, and that will then dovetail with the Minister's approach to introducing the legislation. So hopefully that really helps.
Thank you, that's been really helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. My questioning relates to the police budget. As you know, we've been fairly consistent in our concerns over this budget. Minister, the panel learned last year that you would provide the States of Jersey Police with a letter of comfort in relation to the police and their budget. Can you confirm if this has been delivered to date?
Yes, I can confirm that the letter of comfort has been delivered. And I can't even find out where it is. But yes, I've had a letter of comfort in relation to the recruitment of the, where's it gone? I can never remember the words. It's for up to a 300,000 for employing the 10 new recruits. And then obviously it's based on that people will go throughout the year. So that means that, we recruited them now, so we will lose some throughout the year.
Sure.
Obviously, this is why it is important for us to get numbers for the increases in relation to the legislation, because this should have always happened when new legislation was brought in. However, for the last, 5-10 years, it's all slid down the slope, and that hasn't happened. And so we've introduced new legislation without actually taking into account who's actually going to be delivering it. So that's why we are where we are in relation to recruits.
And the next question relates directly to that. In what is the expectation, if any, of additional funding that would be required for the States of Jersey Police budget in 2027 and onwards?
In my view, my personal view is that in relation to the States of Jersey Police and all of the other agencies in relation to the delivery of this legislation, obviously there's the violence against women and girls, but there's already some financial implications that have been in relation to the fire service. That some of that, there'll be more funding needing to come down the track in relation to completing all of that as well. So I think the thing is that coming into the next government, they will need to be aware that there's a price tag on all of these things, and that is exactly why I've been pushing the States of Jersey Police and others to actually work out how many staff and the cost of those, because we need to fund it. So yes, in my view, there will need to be more funding. Well, it's not only the police, it is all agencies that are going to be involved in the legislation that we bring forward.
Thank you, Minister. What is the current status of the community policing team?
Shall I'll ask him over there to answer that question.
Just building on the last question from the Minister also, that the panel will be delighted to know that we've now sworn in those 10 officers. They were on the steps here just a few weeks ago. The bailiff generously swore them in, and now they are being trained at police headquarters for the first time in 10 years or so, all exclusively in Jersey, not going to the UK, not travelling, not being away from their families.
Excellent.
At 10. So I am very grateful to the Minister, Government, etc., to allow us to be able to do that. First time we've been able to recruit that are not transferees, all people from in the island, first time in 2 years. So I'm delighted about that. I'm also equally delighted about where we are with our community policing team. As we referred to previously, it has been absolutely necessary to move resource to where there is the greatest demand. And we've heard a lot about violence against women and girls. Of course, you will know that that's not the only crimes that occur in the island. It's just the one that gets currently talked about a lot. There is a lot of other crime in the island that needs investigation. So we move resource that we explained to the panel and to the Minister and to the police authority some time ago now, just before Christmas. As a result of the 240,000 in your proposition, it has meant that we've been able to reverse the 3 that we moved to violence against women and girls in a letter that we have sent to all the constables, members of the panel, chair of the police authority and the Minister, that we have been able to bring, we're interviewing I think tomorrow for 1 more. That will take us to 8 in our community policing team, which is we've now combined with our offender management unit, which I am absolutely delighted about. The 240,000 or so does not cover off 3 police officers and the DFU, as we've explained, the digital forensics unit. So it actually pays for 2. So we will have the 2, that is to 8. And it's my aspiration, although I can't commit at this stage, very early into the financial year, my aspiration is to get back to the 9. But I'm delighted to say we have the 8. We've explained each of the dedicated parishes that they're going to. There's been very little change, actually, as you will know.
Agreed, yes.
And that's the reason why we sent the letter to you also. You got updated, and I'm very grateful to everyone's support that we've been able to do that.
And we are very grateful for the continuity that we've had with the community police officers. The panel recognises, you've just mentioned it, Chief Officer, digital forensics as a major challenge for policing. Minister, what impact do you foresee this having on the future of policing, and what implications might this have for government policy?
I think the thing is that in relation to digital, that's another area that's going to have to be invested in, because as we've already talked about, it's about capacity within the system. And of course, we've been able to get some money from the COCF in relation to the infrastructure, but it is about the capacity to be able to keep all of that data. And so I think the thing is, it's almost like what we should be doing is saying, right, well, year on year, there's an increase of this amount, and that should automatically go into a budget year on year, because everything's going digital. And so that, for me, is important, that your infrastructure, but it isn't only about the infrastructure, it is about the people as well. And so I think the thing is that you have to accept as well that something digital might mean you save, what you pay for here means you might save more over here if it's digital and not human, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I mean, the Minister's right. This is the growth area. And particularly the more that we look at additional legislation, most of those crimes will be investigated using one of these things. And I understand all investigations, around 90% of our investigations involve one of these. So fingerprints and DNA and all the rest of it. But of course, that technology moves on quickly. And they tell me now that a new iPhone is 2 terabytes. I don't know the difference between a terabyte and a dog bite, but it's a lot. And we quickly run out of storage space as well, particularly with significant investigations, the major incidents that you will have seen. So the States of Jersey is no different to Guernsey, the Isle of Man and UK forces in trying to catch up with this. We absolutely eat up storage space. And so we do need to have a better solution to how we deal with it. One example, for example, over the last year or so, we've seen a 47% increase in the amount of digital devices we have for VORG-related offences. We now have a record high of nearly 1,000 devices. I understand there's one force in the south of England that now has an 18-month backlog in examining digital devices. And the Minister's absolutely right. This is a place for us to invest. And the reason why it is it gets speedier justice. It will deliver more guilty pleas because the evidence can be so compelling. And I think down the track, it would represent good value for money. But it's costly, software changes, people become more devious, police have to catch up with that or get in front of that. So the final point is we've had really good support from the Criminal Offences Confiscation Fund, which the Minister's already mentioned. We've also been allowed to move some money from our Major Incident Fund to support the storage requirements for the major incidents. So we have had a lot of support. I regret to say that is, we need a longer term plan, as the Minister's already referenced, in how we deal with this into the future. But in short term, we've had good support.
I mean, the draft sexual offences amendment laws are going to be actually pouring in even more issues for you. And the intimate image abuses, would you say?
Oh, every time, because they'll all be digital. And then you need to be able to get into the phones if people are choosing to lock their phones, which there are pretty significant offences if you don't allow us into those phones, which we will be relentless and ruthless about if people do not give us their PIN numbers. Ordinarily they do, and when they don't, of course, there's other technology we might have to use.
Thank you very much indeed. The government accepted a panel amendment to the last budget to increase the head of expenditure for the police by £240,000. Can you confirm how that will be used in this current year?
Yes, so the vast majority has gone to support the 2 additional community police officers. And then the remainder, around about 47 before, there's been a slight cap on that 240 of £15,000. The remainder goes into our digital forensics unit. So we've got, just as we've previously explained to the panel, as the Minister explained, the majority goes into what was requested. We shore up, back up our community policing team because that's so important. And the rest is where we've got the other pressure, digital forensics.
Thank you. And the other thing that we learnt last year, Chief Officer, is the trialling of the Culpar app for evidence collection. Can you confirm if cases successfully been taken to trial using evidence from this app?
We've had a number of cases that have gone to Parish Hall Inquiry, if we want to call that a trial. I'll give you some very basic stats from the 10th of September. For the 10th of September, when it first came in, 12-month trial, as we previously explained before. Thus far, we've had 192 submissions. That's resulted in crime files being created. 68 submissions have a recorded outcome. In other words, we've not just recorded that there is an outcome in terms of it could be Parish Hall, etc. There are 17 cases for motoring offences. So the reason we put that in is it's not just about violence against women and girls. It can be used for anything. The very latest figures, which we got, that was up to the end of the year, the very latest figures now are 235 submissions, 1,678 pieces of information or evidence shared thus far. So again, we're still early days. DCI Mark Havey is just doing the first review to measure its effectiveness. And I will happily come back to the next panel meeting with the outcome of that first review.
Minister, regarding any changes to gun licensing laws, can you clarify what work, if any, has started in this term for the next government to pick up on?
Right, you'll be aware that, and we previously discussed it, that in relation to the actual updating of the firearms law, there was no capacity to be able to move forward with that piece of legislation due to the other legislation in relation to violence and against women and girls. What I've done in the interim time, because I wanted to be able to try and move things a little bit forward, I approached the Comité de Connotab in order to see if we could make some changes in relation to the law to make the positions slightly better from the point of view of ammunition at home. And I think the constables have also bought into the fact of restricting the amount of firearms people have on their wish lists, and they've also not allowing people necessarily to have any ammunition at all, and if they do, only small quantities. It isn't as far as I would have liked to have been. I would have liked to have been able to have a review of the firearms legislation, but of course, in order to have done that, there needs to be a consultation with all of the stakeholders, and then the law to then be looked at and see how, review it and update it. So I'm not where I would have liked to have been at this particular juncture, but as I said, because of the other commitments, I've sort of done as much as I could, if you like.
Thank you. My next question related to consultation, but you've already intimated that is. I can safely say without fear of contradiction that probably the most prevalent phone call that we get at the parish hall and emails that I get as a Connotab relate to speeding offences and speeding within our parishes. And we're still getting the notes of rally engines throughout the night. Please, can you provide an update on the new mobile speed camera?
Well, as Constable have regularly corrected it, I'm told it's not a speed camera, it's a safety camera. So I get corrected, believe me. As you will have seen, the equipment arrived back end of last year. It's a very sophisticated bit of kit. It is not just the handheld camera that you will see officers across the island using. So we've had a number of officers both here and going over to the UK for training, because it takes a good deal of setting up. So that training is now complete. I am pleased to say that next week, and I note that there are a number of people that are hopefully listening to this and the media, that next week we will be deploying the mobile safety camera to a number of venues that will remain secret. I say that in a slightly flippant way because ultimately we want to do is prevent, and that we have a culture where we don't want to speed, and it isn't about, well, I don't speed because I don't want to get caught. I don't speed because actually it's a safe thing to do. So yes, the camera will be being deployed quite extensively over the next month or so. And again, I will come back with the stats and facts. You will recall, though, that I said that we were going to calibrate it quite high. So we will be looking for, people who are excessively speeding, because we have other equipment that can easily accommodate those other things. But as of next month, I will come back and update the panel.
That's marvellous. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And from the pitch of those rally engines, we all know how fast they're going.
Well,
and it'd be very good to get some action on that.
Let me reassure you, this bit of kit will tell you how fast they're going.
Thank you very much.
I have some questions now on work permits and enforcement activity. So during this term, there have been some updates to the work permit policy published by the Jersey Customs and Immigration Service. How has the government been reviewing the impact of any changes made?
Yeah, I can do. So yeah, as you rightly say, we have made significant changes throughout the last term, which I'm pleased to confirm. So impact-wise, again, I think the Chief of Police has already touched on it today. We're a finite service. We have to put our resource where our demand is. We're very conscious that immigration issues are something that we really need to focus on. So we are looking at compliance. We've tightened up on the work permit policy. We've made sure that the criteria within the work permit policy is very clear about what workers who are coming to Jersey need, as in contract-wise, hours of work, going rate of pay. So we are doing regular engagement. We're doing engagement with employers to make sure that they understand those criteria and understand the ongoing nature of those criteria. We're working very closely with the International Cultural Centre, and we ask for people who've got information to come forward to us so we can act on it.
Okay. So you must see trends. Well, actually, this bit is about the demand. So can you outline the 2025 demand trends from different sectors?
Yeah, so obviously for work permits, they're split between the temporary route and the skilled route. Yeah. Skilled obviously leads to residency and temporary doesn't. So in 2025, we've issued 2,433 temporary and 842 skilled. And that makes a total of 3,275. We don't keep data on the different sectors under the skilled work permit, but we do under temporary. And the temporary is made up of 4 different sectors, agriculture and horticulture, and that was 484 permits in 2025. Construction, 186, aquaculture and fishing, 4, and hospitality, 1,758.
Do you think it would be good to have data on the skilled work permits, on the trends and so on?
I think any data is good, provided it's robust and accurate. So I'd welcome data, but obviously we would have to review our own systems and how we could record that data.
Okay. And can you describe how Jersey Customs and Immigration Service has approached enforcement? I know you've said that you've got the engagement with employers, but actual enforcement when you hear about things not being done properly?
So when we get information in, as we do for any type of criminality, we will then act upon that information by validating it, assessing if it's credible. So we do the same on the immigration side as we do on the customs side. So again, any information we get, we will act upon. And again, the enforcement and the compliance at the moment is focused very much on engagement. So specifically engagement with employers. We've had instances where we know that the employers have been using bad practice and we have sanctioned them. So we have said that they can't get any more work permits. So at the moment, it's the balance between education and compliance and sanctioning people who are doing the wrong thing.
Okay, so those sanctions, would that just be for a limited time?
We do it on a case-by-case basis. We find, especially with immigration, that each case is so different that actually we have a framework we work under, but we have to look at the circumstances of each case.
Those areas of non-compliance, are they in particular sectors of the economy generally?
I would have to go back and look at the data. We get information on all sorts of non-compliance issues across the board, but I'd have to go back and look at the data if you'd want a breakdown, which I can give you.
Yeah, that would be really good. Thank you. And have there been any other common areas of non-compliance, like working outside permit conditions or things like that?
Again, I would have to go and look at the data. So the criteria we have in the work permits that are quite strict are the hours of work and the going rate. Yeah. And then obviously another criteria under the work permit policy is suitable accommodation. But I would have to go back and look at the data to give you accurate figures on what it is.
Okay. So do you find that you have enough resources for analysing these issues?
So again, I'll go back to what the Chief of Police said about resource and demand. I would defy anybody to sit here and say they have got sufficient resources and wouldn't welcome more resources. I'm very conscious that we have the resources that we do have. We have to look, we are so broad as a service, customs and immigration, we have to look at our areas of risk and our areas of demand. immigration compliance and enforcement is one of those areas of demand. So we're looking this year at how we can shift the resources we've got in the service so we can put more emphasis on the compliance aspect.
Okay. And
But we
was-
will investigate any information, and we have successfully charged immigration offences.
Yeah, because of course we've gone from 396 work permits in 2020 to 3,275 in 2025.
Yeah.
So it's a significant, it is a significant
Yes, it is.
number, and it's probably unlikely to change. So
Yeah.
I think that's the thing.
And do you find there is a problem with people not coming forward to complain because they're worried about their
About
status?
their job.
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
do. And that is something that I'm really working hard to try and engage with all stakeholders to gain that trust and confidence of the migrant workforce on island to say that they can come to us with information and we will act on it.
Okay.
Because we have set up groups, a safeguarding group in order that all of those can, because obviously quite often they're reluctant to come to government, if you like. So we're setting up groups. Well, we've set up groups so that we can actually get them to try and other agencies to try and actually encourage them to come to us and explain, because quite often there is, I think, a misunderstanding that if there's a problem with their work permit, they'll be deported. Well, you don't get deported unless you've committed a criminal offence and gone to prison.
Yeah.
You might have your work permit removed, but you don't get deported. And I think it is about people understanding and sometimes thinking that something's going to happen to them when in actual fact that's not the case. And I think that's quite important
Yeah. And
to get that message out.
And if people are worried, they can go direct to Customs and Immigration Service. They could speak to any of the deputies or constables. And there's also the International Cultural Centre.
We work very closely with the International Cultural
Yeah.
Centre.
Just one thing I wanted to mention that's come up today, because I speak to quite a lot of people with work permit problems, is those wanting to learn to drive being told that they can't learn to drive because they're not going to have enough time left on their visa. And they intend to stay in the island. It's just a thing that's come up.
That's news to me, but I'll take that away and I'll
Okay.
have a look at that.
Okay.
The one thing just to mention when you're talking about compliance and enforcement is we've run the data on the amount of work permit applications that we've refused. We can see that increasing, so we are bringing our compliance as well to the point of entry. So if we can do compliance before entry, obviously it helps everybody, including us and the island as a whole. In 2025, we refused 195 work permits, as opposed to in 2020 it was 3.
That's me.
Common issues will be that employers intending to pay less than the going rate for the role, or that the role that they're applying for isn't in the work permit policy, but also we're looking and scrutinising qualifications and references of people applying for jobs.
And that was 195.
195.
Yeah, because we have had some whereby they've been employed and arrived, and then their qualifications aren't suitable, and that makes it really difficult for both sides. So it's important for it to be done before they get here.
Totally.
So we are looking at everything in the whole as to where we can
Okay.
undertake compliance.
Thank you, and we look forward to getting that written info. Thank you. We missed that bit out. Go on to that could go in writing.
Sure,
Because we
I
haven't got a
agree.
lot of time
I'd
left.
just like to
So-
add to one thing I'd like, we
was
all
wondering if we
went
could
to
go on
your
to your-
presentation at the Pom d'Or,
Please,
Rhiannon, it was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Be the dog.
The
Mostly.
panel was grateful for your cooperation, Minister, in its evidence gathering for its review of the what protections children in Jersey have from online harms. And in the ministerial response that we had last week to that report, it was confirmed that you would partially accept the panel's recommendation number 22 to review the sexual offences Jersey law to consider expanding offences about misinterpretation in order to provide additional protection for children in Jersey. This action, though, was commended to the next minister in post after the election for action later in 2026. So the question is really, can you confirm how you will suggest that this is passed over to the next government?
I think the thing is that with this particular piece of legislation, I think it's important that we've sort of got one part of it, and the Sexual Offences Amendment was lodged with the Assembly, widens the existing Article 15, sexual grooming of a child offence under the Sexual Offences Law. Under the existing law, a person commits a crime if they have having already met or messaged a child aged 15 or younger than meet or travel to meet that child. For the purpose of carrying out a relevant offence, this narrowly defined offence has created issues for law enforcement when a perpetrator behaves outside of these boundaries. For example, if the child travels to meet the perpetrator as opposed to the other way round, has made plans to carry out this offence but has not yet acted on those plans, this does not meet the elements of the offence. The law amends this offence so that the police can intervene with perpetrators in the process of carrying out this offence at an earlier stage and therefore prevent further harm to the child. I think what will be essential in relation to this legislation is that the training element to police officers is implemented so that there's an understanding better of what these new offences that we're bringing in will actually have. I don't know if Nathan's got any more to add in that.
Well, simply that in terms of the commendation to the future, it's quite normal for new ministers to receive a package of information about the ministerial role, of course, being a corporation so that continues. When you land in the seat, you buy into the commitments. So effectively, we would raise with the next government the commitments made by the various ministers, which would mean
So that's where the continuity comes from. Okay. Thank you. The Minister for Sustainable Economic Development has just launched a consultation on online harms, specifically around content removal. Can you confirm how this will work alongside the draft Sexual Offences Jersey Amendment Law, which has been lodged, which introduces new requirements relating to the deletion and removal of intimate images?
The Draft Offences Jersey Amendment Law introduces a series of new intimate image abuse offences and strengthens existing legislative provisions relating to the offence of voyeurism and indecent photographs of children. It relates to the implementation of VAUG Task Force Recommendation 11, and this, we don't feel that this work overlaps but is complemented by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development's consultation on online content removal, which relates to the implementation of VAUG Recommendation number 10. So I think from that aspect, we didn't think that it was overlapping. I don't know if you want to add more to that, Nathan, really.
if you don't mind. So it's two halves of a thing rather than things that overlap too much. So the criminal justice legislation that we're working on targets the offender in the act to try and provide restitution to the victims and hopefully stop people doing it in the future. The work the economy is doing is more targeted at the relationship between the individual and the platforms and the hosts and the content hosts. So we hope that our work will stop people doing things like sharing intimate images of children and adults. But when they do, yes, they can be punished for that, but no criminal justice system can move at the speed of the internet. So then you're out of your control of the individual and you're into dealing with hosting platforms and saying you take it down. So that they're two parts of the same general activity. There's not actually that much interconnection because they're targeted at quite different things.
And are there ongoing discussions between the policy teams for both departments?
We meet fortnightly, and we've taken all of our stuff with the stalking where it pertains to online, the intimate image stuff and everything else. We take through the economy guys just to make sure that they're understanding what we do.
Thank you. Minister, can you tell us whether you're attending the meetings of the Online Harms Interministerial Group and what the Justice and Home Affairs input has been into that group?
I've been attending all the meetings. I can't actually remember.
I think they met on the 18th of December for the first time, chaired by Deputy Ferry in the Children's Minister's absence, I think.
And they
Yeah.
had internet service providers there.
Yeah, I would have been definitely there because I go to all those meetings. I have to apologise. I can't actually remember.
Okay, I was going to say, could you let us know about the work to date? But if you haven't,
Yeah,
been there, that's absolutely fine.
I can. I've been to all the meetings, but I can't remember. If I'm perfectly honest, apologies.
Thank you. I'm going to hand you over.
Right. Thank you. There's another one that the panel have been quite keen about. The Army and Sea Cadet Headquarters. Minister, can you provide details about the status of the Army and Sea Cadet Headquarters project and describe how this will be handled over to the next government.
Just explain, the only reason we're laughing is because it's been going on.
A while.
Yeah.
I think you'll find though, Deputy Curtis, that for some of us within this room, it's been going on for a lot longer. Anyway, the JHA with colleagues from Jersey Property Holdings and SIPES continue to look for an appropriate permanent location which would meet the requirements of the Sea Cadets. Not only indoor classrooms, office and storage space, but additionally suitable outside space for the Sea Cadets. Current emphasis has been around the viability of sharing facilities model with a school, with classrooms, hall, kitchen amenities being shared with bespoke storage built for wider requirements. This feasibility study is reaching a conclusion shortly. Work also continues through the Corporate Property Management Board to look at other alternatives in regard to vacant premises. The budget in relation to the Sea Cadets was reduced by government plan by from 5 million to 1.4 on the basis that a shared facility model will be more cost effective with a standalone capital build. I think the thing is that the government, or as a whole, the island as a whole, the government as a whole, has not really been efficient in the way that they manage their buildings. And I think it's obvious that we really don't want to be building another one when there's clearly spaces elsewhere to be utilised. And I think there might have been a sort of an understanding that there might have been facilities that were available in other places, but actually they weren't maybe as available as we thought they were. So I think that work is ongoing. Have we actually got a date for it to be completed?
Well, I think there's two aspects to that. We've got a new strong line of inquiry. Sorry to be a bit evasive, but I can't say where it is yet, which I haven't yet discussed with the Minister, which we are talking to the Sea Cadet leaders about in the next few weeks. I want to be sure it's feasible and viable before we talk about it in more detail, but I am hoping that will work. I think in terms of the timing, because there's a critical dependency between the Sea Cadets' current location and the potential future development of the fire and rescue headquarters, which we're sort of clear to proceed with now in terms of sort of site selection and funding in the government plan through the Investing in Jersey programme. The spotlight is even more on the Sea Cadets because of that interdependency. And what I really need to do is work back from the potential start date for the fire and rescue headquarters to map out a firm timetable for Sea Cadets. So once we've pursued this strong line of inquiry, I can hopefully do that, and we can obviously update the panel in slightly less vague terms, hopefully in the next few weeks.
Can I just ask, you mentioned the Corporate Property Management Board?
Yeah, so
Is that new?
it was called the Corporate Asset Management Board for some
Okay.
time. It's now properties. It's been sitting for probably 5 or 6 years as part of the sort of corporate landlord approach. It has a representative from each of the main operational departments, so us, health, obviously SIPES, and together we consider all the property opportunities, disposals, strategic needs of the departments,
How often does that body meet?
monthly, I think, and try and spot the opportunity. And that is where this opportunity came from, really. To see, exactly as the Minister says, how we can best use what we have already rather than building new things. So that's a strong steer for ministers that we should be seeking to do that. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that this one comes off and we can give you a substantive update, but I need a couple more weeks to get it working.
Okay.
But here's the big one.
Minister, one of the pieces of work that has been paused this term is the development of legislation to create a corporate manslaughter offence. So what's your assessment of that?
I'm going to ask Nathan in a second just to clarify exactly where we're at. You're right in that it's pretty much ready to go, but there wasn't facility for law drafting. But more importantly, both myself and another deputy have been approached in relation to other opportunities under different legislation. And so I think it would be prudent to have a look at that prior to us actually moving forward with the corporate manslaughter law. And I can't give you more detail than that because I can't remember under what, I think it might be under companies law. I'm not 100% sure, I can't remember. But certainly I'll just ask Nathan to double check on this, but I've got a feeling it's pretty much ready to go. But before we actually sort of launched into it, somebody else and myself had been approached by somebody who'd done some research in relation to another opportunity, which may make it easier and less, not work, I'm not saying, it's just that it might not need necessarily a new piece of legislation. I think it might be better to ask Nathan about the corporate manslaughter part of it.
So drafting instructions for the corporate manslaughter law were completed. It was simply a case of scheduling in for drafting time. So for it to go ahead, you need drafting time and you need a policy officer available to effectively do the legislation, to work on it and work with the drafter to make sure it works, do the consultation and the other things. And because of the constraints of other work during the course of the second half of this government, it didn't make the cut. And things don't. There's been some very significant pieces that we brought forward, and effectively we just simply weren't able to resource it. And it will be up to the next government to determine whether or not they want to put it on the priority list.
But there may be an alternative way of doing it through
Potentially,
fitting
I'm not-
something into other legislation.
Yeah, I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% sure about this, but it is something that somebody's highlighted. There's been a piece of work from. I don't think they're a lawyer. I don't know, but there's something else that I've been approached and somebody else has been approached about, which we would want to look at. And I think Nathan may have received some correspondence as well. But this is quite recent. So obviously the corporate manslaughter thing hasn't developed, but obviously if this other way forward is better, then that might be an option. But personally, I wouldn't, how can I put this without, being flippant? I wouldn't withhold corporate manslaughter if the other idea was going to take too long. If that makes sense, I would want to push that forward.
And do you think during what remains in this term there'll
Well,
be
we won't be
time
able
to
to-
look at the alternative?
Yes, I think we might have an opportunity to do that, but I don't think we'll have much opportunity to do anything else because, as you can appreciate, there's quite a significant amount of piece of legislation still coming through.
Okay. I think we could ask one of those data questions because we have a little bit of time unless you want me to ask it
By all means, Chair, yeah. feel
before we
free.
go on to the last.
Sure,
one.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes, just one thing about, we were concerned, obviously, we've spoken quite a bit about data collection. Can you provide the panel with an update about the collection of data sets for Justice and Home Affairs?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So there is limited analytical resource, as you know, for Justice and Home Affairs. That there is some in SOJP and a single analyst for JHA, which is a significant advance on none, which was the case a couple of years ago. I think one of the interests of the panel is where there's gaps. So there are still some gaps as the single analyst works with the services and is also working with the Building a Safer Community Coordinator on the youth justice and the VORG data mapping exercises. And as we talked about earlier, some of that is really relevant to demand anyway and demand from new laws and helping us profile what that looks like in the future. It's obviously important the department complies with the Code of Practice for Statistics, which is one of the analysts' key tasks, and we had some work to do to get up to the right, nothing was at risk, but we had some work to do to get up to the right standards. We do have some gaps still at various points in operational data across the services. And obviously there's a sort of different levels of data that's needed. There's a sort of day-to-day management information moving up to what we'd call service performance measures, and then at the more publicly available level, the key performance indicators for those services. And it is when we look across, when we're trying to get a feel on what system-wide activity looks like, that we've got some real challenges. We are making some progress, particularly in the VORG and youth justice space, but it is still work in progress.
So you've identified gaps. Do you see this situation improving? Do you see more resource heading in this direction?
I would like to see more resource heading in this direction, but obviously, as other contributors have said, we're always conscious of the financial situation, the wider financial situation, and it will obviously be done on a sort of needs and risk basis. But I think that, there is a strong case for some more activity in this space.
Have you seen where this increased data availability has improved or influenced policy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I mean, we've always taken pride that any business case we put forward for investment is good quality, but there's no doubt the ones we've done recently have been materially improved by the analysis that we have now got. We've always been data rich, but we've not been very good at analysing it and using it. And you do see a significant change as a result of the investment in that, and a very good skill and capability of that one person that we have assisting us with it.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Right, this is our last public hearing as us.
Do I hear a cheer? Do I?
And Minister, what are your overarching reflections on this term of office, and which commitments remain unfinished? What initiatives are currently in progress that may be carried forward to the next minister should they choose to do so? So, what's sort of been outstanding and you're pleased about, but what also hasn't got done that you think needs to be done?
I think obviously, the team have done, it's not me, it's the team have done an exceptional job in relation to the violence against women and girls. That was a significant amount of recommendations and a plan, including all of the lodging of those laws and completion of the criminal courts review. We've still got obviously the family court review, which is going to start imminently. And obviously there's going to be the annual report that will come up that was requested by the Constable of St Martin's. Alongside that, obviously the other legislation that's being finished eventually, the police complaints, hurrah, says the Chief of Police and Deputy Miles, and others, probably the team in the policy thing. Obviously, the remission for youths at Greenfields is also really valuable, because we need to make sure that we're working and ensuring that it doesn't matter where you are in a facility, that you have got the same rights as anyone else. Obviously, the relaunch of Building a Safer Community Framework, which was started by my predecessor, because both that person and myself were not particularly happy that had disappeared into the wild blue yonder. And obviously with that, the roadmap as well. There's still the hate crime needs to be done, but obviously that will need some sort of consultation. There's the resilience law in relation to the fire service, obviously fire precautions, firearms law, obviously the other laws we've talked about, and also, of course, when I took over this role, I was very keen in relation to modern day slavery. We do need to sort out how we would manage that. We can't necessarily have the kind of legislation that they've got in the UK because of the administrative burden, but there needs to be more work. What I am pleased about is that having sort of had this vision, sometimes your vision isn't always what you can actually achieve in reality, because it's not always as straightforward. But what I am pleased about is that the level of work and the teamwork that has happened between all of those, from customs and immigration, policing, and all of those agencies that are involved with migrant workers, and all of the other agencies, so many of them that are all working together, and the encouragement that we're giving them to actually come forward. But also as well, as I said, there's been some phenomenal work by all the team. And I've actually, strangely enough, enjoyed, you as a panel. I think it's been a very positive panel. I've done not 7 years in scrutiny. My first term was in scrutiny. We had a really good working relationship with the ministers. We worked to enable things to be done, not obstruct things to be done. And I think, before coming into this role, I worked on infrastructure, housing and environment. That team was exactly the same. And I think sometimes we forget that we can actually work better working together than working separately. And that's what being a team is, because there's 49 members of us, there's only 21 in government. The other 28 are all part and parcel of that. And I think that's what's essential, and that's what we must never forget, is that we can achieve a lot more by working together as opposed to working against each other. I'll make no bones about it. I shouldn't say this, I was quite happy that you brought the amendment of 240,000. I'll make it public. I was quite happy, because you know, it sometimes is easier and we did the same thing as a health panel. We got an amendment to the health panel when I was in that, and that's what got the Article 36 bed at St Saviour's Hospital, was the £500,000. It took a long time to come. I wouldn't say it's always necessarily worked because of the resources involved in that as well, but it was scrutiny that were able to make that significant change. The violence against women and girls was a proposition that was brought by the Constable of St Martin's and started that chain. And so we now are here to where we are today. So I thank all of you and all of the team, because I know by having worked in scrutiny how hard they all work as well.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that our relationship with this particular ministry has been very positive, and I'd also like to thank our officers too for the incredible input that they put to make it such a positive relationship, and I thank them very much.
Yeah, they're really good. And yes, what you're saying, we all are and should be working to the same aim, which is try and make things better for people in Jersey, isn't it? So, yeah, thank you very much. And I think that's probably the end of our hearing then. Okay, thank you.